Watchers in the Fourth Dimension.
I understand. Have a primary and secondary reproductive cycle.
I'm not afraid of men. They don't own the world.
Call I am grown a fool? I'll have the marrow from your bones, my little chicken.
Hello and welcome back to Watchers in the Fourth Dimension. I'm Anthony.
I'm Don.
I'm Julie.
And I'm Reilly. And are Sir Edward's men so ill-fed?
It's time for a new season with a new companion, new title sequence, and new logo. That's right, this episode we will be discussing The Time Warrior. But before we get into that, Julie is going to take a very quick look at our mail. Over to you, Julie.
Thank you. Luckily, or not so lucky, I don't know. Because of our recording schedule, we don't have too much mail to go over today. All 3 pieces of mail have to do with the Green Death. First one is from Kieran James Evans, who says, "It's between this and Carnival for my favorite of the season. While the Welsh stereotypes are a little thick, it's Pertwee's impression that is most annoying, with it being over the top in not a good way. The actual story and characters are all great. Maybe just the curse of being a 6-part lets it down a little." Gotta say, I tend to disagree. I thought the fact that Pertwee was so over the top was actually really fun and not annoying. Maybe that's just me.
No, agreed.
His accent was not good, though.
Oh, absolutely not. Our friend Peter Beatnik says, "Hippies, maggots, and a show tunes loving AI. It's just too bad the miners die instead of the hippies." 6.5 out of 10 hippie protesters. I gotta say, that makes me a little sad. Why do the miners or the hippies have to die? Maybe someone else could have. I don't know. Last but not least, the Whovian Gal. This is probably my second favorite Pertwee story, after Inferno. Sorry, Don.
It's all right. It's all good.
I also find it funny how the production team wanted the political elements to be more subtle. Our definition of subtle politics has clearly changed in the past 50 years. Yes, it has. And that is it for the mail. Back to you, Anthony.
And just to add some context, it's only 6 days since we last recorded, so it's a little shorter time than usual. We went like 6 weeks without recording and then 6 days. Anyway, thank you, Julie. As a reminder, we love hearing all of your feedback, comments, and questions, and we do try to read out as many of them as possible. You can reach us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at @Watchers4D, or via email at watchers4d@gmail.com. We would love to hear from you. With that, we move into our behind-the-scenes segment, and there is a little bit more to cover than usual this time round. Work on this serial started basically as soon as Robert Holmes had finished work on his previous one, Carnival of Monsters. His initial submission was for a story that had the working title of The Automata. Producer Barry Letts and script editor Terence Dix rejected this, and Dix proposed that Holmes work on a story with a historical setting, something that Holmes was distinctly unenthusiastic about, as he felt that historical stories were a relic of the show's original educational remit and should be left in the past.
Boo!
However, he did agree to setting the serial in the medieval period on the condition that it would feature no historical figures and could still include a strong science fictional element. At the end of February 1973, he was formally commissioned to write a storyline that was provisionally entitled The Time Fugitive. One of the center points of the story would be a new race of aliens called the Sontarans. Wonder if we'll ever hear from them again. Whom Holmes devised after reading Prussian General Karl von Clausewitz's early 18th century military strategy work on war. He prepared his submission in the form of a military communique between the Sontarans Holmes and Terran Sedix. Wonder where we've heard those names before. When full scripts were requested, the story became known as The Time Survivor before ultimately settling on the name The Time Warrior. While Holmes was busy working on the scripts, Letts and Dix were working on casting the new companion. The character eventually became known as Sarah Jane Smith, who was written to be more independent and modern than Joe Grant, partially in response to accusations of sexism that were occasionally leveled at the show. The role was first awarded to an actress by the name of April Walker, who had previously appeared in The One-Din Line, Dad's Army, and Crossroads. John Pertwee was absolutely furious with the casting for 2 reasons. First, they had previously worked together, and he felt that the 2 of them had very little chemistry. Second, and on a slightly more chauvinistic note, he argued that she did not have the slender, petite body type that he felt worked best alongside his doctor. I see you, John Pertwee. I see you. Walker's contract was promptly cancelled, although she was still paid in full for the entire season. Nice work if you can get it. The final actress to audition from the role was Elizabeth Sladen, who initially believed that she was auditioning for a guest spot. After impressing Letts, she was introduced to Pertwee, who this time was allowed to give his approval because obviously they didn't want to have to pay a second actress for a season that she wasn't going to be in. And she was promptly cast in the role. Prior to Doctor Who, she had started her career on stage in repertory theatre in Liverpool, before eventually transitioning to the screen, and she had been in episodes of Z-Cars, Doomwatch, and Coronation Street. The Time Warrior was actually the final story to be recorded as part of the show's 10th recording block, although it was held back to open season 11. Letts had hoped to direct the serial himself, but both he and Dix were busy preparing for production on their new show, Moonbase 3, which they both anticipated eventually leaving Doctor Who for, if it were to be successful. Spoiler alert, it only lasted one season, and they did not leave Doctor Who for it. But, with Letts not being available, veteran director Alan Bromley was given the director's chair. He was known as both a director and a producer, and worked most notably on Z-Cars, That Old Chestnut, Emmerdale Farm, Paul Temple, Out of the Unknown, Coronation Street, and Crossroads.
I'm beginning to think that April really didn't get the job because she never appeared on Z-Cars.
Oh, wait, there's more. Joining Bromley on the creative team, we have old Dudders returning to provide incidental music. James Aitchison is back with costumes, and don't forget, he will eventually design the costumes for Sam Raimi's Spider-Man trilogy. And we also have Keith Cheetham making his only contribution to the show as designer, and he is also notable for work on Dixon of Dock Green, The Two Ronnies, and, you guessed it, Z-Cars.
That just supports my theory.
Now, with Dix and Letts planning on leaving the show, they started working on hiring Dix's replacement. Occasional Doctor Who writer Lewis Marks suggested Robert Holmes for the job, and despite an apparently very tense meeting with BBC head of serials Ronnie Marsh, Holmes got the job and would spend much of the season shadowing Dix. That sounds kind of rude. Additionally, Letts wanted to launch the show into its second decade with some changes, and so over the summer break, between seasons, he asked Bernard Lodge of the BBC's graphics department to create a new title sequence. While the howl-around technique had been used in all three of the title sequences to date, Letts wanted something different. Lodge used a technique called split screen, in which abstract designs were photographed by a moving camera through an aperture cut in a solid mask, creating an amorphous tunnel of light. Lodge also designed a new logo for the show, introducing the legendary diamond logo. Love those Art Deco vibes on that one. Both the new title sequence and the logo were introduced with this serial. The finished serial was broadcast between the 15th of December 1973 and the 5th of January 1974, with the final episode once again getting over 10 million viewers. So with that, it's time for our short summary, which is in the hands of Don this episode. Over to you, my friend.
Thank you, sir. In this, the pilot episode to the Sarah Jane Adventures, while investigating the disappearance of several present-day scientists, intrepid reporter Sarah Jane accidentally travels back in time to the not-so-merry old England of the 13th century. Along with her temporary companion, the archer Hal, she must stop the plans of an evil space baked potato who has been kidnapping scientists to force them to repair his ship, and also providing the local extremely overconfident robber baron with weapons, just because he's bored. Keep an eye out for cameo appearances by John Pertwee as a monk, a robot knight, and the inventor of the stink bomb.
Nice. So with that, let's talk about not episode 1, but part 1.
I honestly didn't even realize that it changed. I was too distracted by the opening to notice that it said part 1 instead.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that gorgeous new title sequence.
I'm not sold on it yet.
Yeah, and I don't know why. I was never a fan of the diamond logo.
I'm with you on that. It always looked cheesier to me. I like the intro. I just don't think we need the full body shot of Pertwee as part of it. I think the face was enough.
Yeah.
But the split screen, very cool. I like that effect a lot.
It's interesting that we get this for the last season of Pertwee, because I feel like the split screen technique is much more associated with the Tom Baker era, and this is like a kind of trial run of what would be his title sequence. It's not quite there yet. It's not quite that iconic one that we all know and love and is often parodied on things like Family Guy.
Do we all know and love? Because some of us don't know and love yet.
Fair point, Julie.
Have to call you out on that every once in a while.
That's true. But have you really never seen it on like clip shows and stuff like that?
Not really.
Okay, fair enough.
And maybe I have, and I don't have that association with Tom Baker. It could be that I'm familiar with that sequence, but since I've never seen any Tom Baker runs, like I just don't associate it that way.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
but I'm not sold on it. I think the full body shot's weird.
It doesn't really last. I mean, they go for something a bit different. I do love the diamond logo, but when I was growing up, it was the logo of the show that was on all of the VHS releases and Doctor Who magazine and all that kind of thing. So for me, that's very classic and nostalgic.
I can completely understand the nostalgic pull of it. It's just never really appealed to me personally, but that's okay.
Yeah, it's fair. All right, into the story, and we have 6.5 minutes of shooting stars, bad-tempered Saxons / Vikings, and potato aliens.
I love it, mainly because of all of the terrible sayings that happen throughout this entire serial. One of them being, "Are you chicken-hearted knaves?" which he says multiple times through this serial. Makes me very happy.
There's also a whole lot of insolence going around. There's a lot of insolent this and insolent that.
I think that Iron Gron, which I don't think is his real name, I think he made that up, especially with Blood Axe right next to him. I mean, that's very middle school heavy metal there. I think he is the one bad guy who, he's more stupid than bad, but you get my point, who Omega would tell him to turn it down a bit. He's just a little too over the top.
Just a little bit. Just a little bit.
That is a good point that Anthony raises. We spend a lot of our time in every episode with him. At times I was watching this like, am I watching Doctor Who? I don't really see the Doctor very much. I don't see Sarah Jane very much. I do see this guy a lot, yelling at people and calling them insolent. At least he's fun. He's not a boring villain.
It's funny because I think Blood Axe is just as much of an idiot. I mean, when Lynx introduced himself, Blood Axe says, "I've heard tales of his Easter magic." I didn't realize that there was specific magic for Easter, but cool.
I don't think Blood Axe would necessarily be a bad guy without Iron Gron's influence. He's just an idiot.
So's Iron Gron, to be honest.
Yeah, but he's an idiot with some ambition, and the only reason he's gotten away with it is because there's nobody around to stop him, and it wouldn't take much.
But I timed it, and it is genuinely 6.5 minutes before we see the Doctor and the Brigadier.
Yeah, but you know what we do get? We get some clarinets and muted trumpet, so it's not all synth, and that made me happy. It's still not my favorite music, but it's not offensive, like I used to say.
It's getting there, right?
Yeah.
Dudley's gonna Dudley. That's just how that goes. Okay, I don't have a whole lot of complaints about this serial. Spoiler. But one of them was that by the time we get to the Brigadier and the Doctor, we have already solved the initial mystery as an audience. We know what's happening. Couldn't you have reconfigured this a bit so we actually have the scientists missing and then we get some idea of what's going on?
It's funny because you look at it that way. I look at it as kind of the whole thing is just then irony throughout the entire serial. So it's just, it kind of works for me. I don't need it to be a mystery every time.
I mean, it didn't ruin it for me, obviously. Mm-hmm. I just felt that one little cut was like, we couldn't wait till the end to know what's going on, but still, it was fine.
Let's talk about goings on in present time. The Doctor and Lethbridge-Stewart talking about scientists going missing, those working on new alloys, guidance systems, etc. So the Brigadier takes them all away from their families and basically locks them up in a maximum security facility, which is a bit extreme.
A little bit.
When is the Brigadier not extreme? I mean, he committed genocide.
Yeah.
Well, by this point in the show, he's bonkers, so it's fine.
Yeah, that's true. He has already lost his mind officially in the Three Doctors, so at this point, he's just a danger to himself and others.
It serves the story for the only reason it doesn't prevent anyone else from getting kidnapped, but it does put them in a place where the Doctor can then detect them being kidnapped and go chasing after them.
With his alarm clock, which I loved.
But the Brigadier's plan is stupid.
Well, yes.
Well, yes.
Well, the Brigadier's plan also allows us to entice a character like Sarah Jane to want to go there because it's something that's pulling, it's something mysterious. It's pulling all these scientists to this one place. So as a journalist, you'd be interested as to what's going on over there.
On that note, the Brigadier talks about the kind of scientists that he's bringing in, and then also a virologist, Lavinia Smith. And she, even if it was Lavinia Smith and not her niece Sarah Jane undercover as a reporter, that wouldn't really fit in with the kind of scientists that they've been talking about.
Also, it took 9 minutes and 34 seconds for us to get a woman on screen. Just wanted to point that out there.
Not that anyone's timing these things.
A lot of timing, this story.
Okay, I need to pitch something here. Occasionally we do the Big Finish Are You Listening segment.
Mm-hmm.
This is mine. I need this to be set after the doctor has left unit. And so they bring in Rubeish to basically handle the doctor's job along with Miss Hawthorne from the demons, because there's more supernatural things going on. And it's called Absolute Rubeish.
That would be
Nice.
great.
Can't lose.
Absolutely.
He's very likable, isn't he?
He is. He reminds me of like a helpful secondary character in a Scooby-Doo episode.
Yes.
I'm not gonna lie, I was sitting here watching some of this, and there are times throughout the serial where he is more helpful than Sarah Jane. So I'm just sitting here, I'm like, couldn't we have had Rubeish as a companion? That would have been interesting and different.
That would have been very different.
I would have loved it. I love Rubeish. I'm all on board the Rubeish train. Let's talk about Sarah Jane. First off, I had no idea that her background was a reporter. After seeing Sarah Jane and some of like the newer Doctor Who, and then just knowing of her and things, so I had no idea about that. But I also like that she got really indignant when she was asked to make coffee.
I honestly think that was done by the Doctor to just test her. Would she strike back against a request like that? And I think that's intentionally what he was doing. I don't think he was just being an ass. I think he was just trying to see who she was, if she'd have the fight in her to say something.
And I think it's almost paralleling Joe, where he immediately makes an assumption that she's the tea girl. And here he's prodding her, and then he's like, okay, I'm going to go make my own coffee. Cool.
And he also knew she wasn't who she was claiming to be.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So it's nice to kind of prod her a little bit.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But by the time we flip back to the medieval period, we meet another woman when we meet Sir Edward and his wife, Lady Eleanor. And I do want to say Lady Eleanor, played by the wonderful June Brown, rest in peace. She died about a month ago. She was 95 years old, and in her time had starred in 2,371 episodes of EastEnders.
Legend.
And by the way, she also was in Z-Cars at one point.
When did she have time?
As was Blood Axe, as was Iron Gron. David Dake, who played Iron Gron, was actually a series regular in Z-Cars.
Did he tone it down a bit in Z-Cars? Or was this is my chance?
I've never seen an episode of Z-Cars, so I have as much clue as you do.
Ah,
I just want to see the episode with Brian Blessed, and then I'll be set.
Well, he was a series regular as well.
Oh, was he? I thought he was
Yeah.
only in... Oh.
That was the start of Brian Blessed's career. So an episode with David Dacre and Brian Blessed.
Oh.
Over
Yes.
the top brilliance.
Which one of them is playing a Z car?
Dear, oh dear. Okay, moving on.
Back on topic.
Lady Eleanor, let's discuss her, because she's really kind of the impetus in Edward's kingdom, really.
Yeah, she's the brains behind the throne.
Yeah, Edward seems a bit kind of limp and...
He's a wet blanket.
Yeah.
Yes. I love her, though, because she does it so subtly, where it's that I have everything run like clockwork, but I don't go out and throw it in people's faces, and I appreciated that aspect of it.
subtle power.
She wasn't doing an Ingrid Pitt from the Time Monster, is what you're saying.
That.
It's like she knows that in the late 11th century, a woman openly being in a position of power like that most likely would not have been accepted. So she is influencing from her position, but not upstaging Sir Edward. I love it.
Let's get to our ending towards our cliffhanger.
Yeah, so we meet Hal the Archer, who is fantastic.
Is Robin Hood.
And Boba Fett.
Yeah, and he is Boba Fett. The original Boba Fett.
Yes, or Robin Fett, whatever you want to do.
Robin Fett. Before we get to bringing the Doctor and Sarah Jane to that location, I need to discuss the direction and the camera work of the Doctor slipping into the TARDIS while talking to the Brigadier, and then Sarah Jane stumbling into the TARDIS, so to speak. That was, direction-wise, not very good. Because there's a scene going on in the front, and I think they realized they couldn't shoot it right. They had to chop it, and it made it look really awkward, where if they shot it from a wide angle or just from further back, you would see that when the Doctor is talking to the Brigadier, she somehow can't see them, doesn't know they're there, they don't know that she's there, and then she kind of like peers into the TARDIS looking for him. And then she goes in. All this is happening while they're literally 6 feet from her, just further upstage. It's just not well designed. And I realized the problem was that the director had a set where he couldn't figure out how to shoot that because it was so cramped.
Maybe it was shot a little oddly, but at the same time, I don't think she didn't see the Doctor and the Brigadier. I think she absolutely saw them. As for them two, obviously they didn't see her because she was looking for Rubeish.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
I guess they should have seen her walking. But anyway, just a small thing that bothered me. I just didn't like the editing. I didn't like how that was shot. Just felt like it could have been done a lot better.
So we've got Sarah Jane as a stowaway. We get to the medieval period with Sarah Jane and the Doctor, and she accidentally messes up Al's shot. So sad.
I mean, it would have been a much shorter serial if she had.
It would have. But I kind of love it. I love that she stumbles in and ruins everything and then just assumes that she is in some kind of pageant, historical reenactment, or what we would have in the US as the Renaissance Festival. I think it's so funny that she just has no clue that she has traveled in time.
Which is kind of nice, because a lot of times we get the setup of, oh, this is the TARDIS and going anywhere in time and space, blah, blah, blah. And then they go on their first adventure. Here it's different, and I like that she's like, what is going on? So it's nice.
And we get our cliffhanger.
That's where I was going to go. So we get the Doctor kind of hiding behind some barrels in the grounds of the castle. Lynx takes off his helmet and we see the baked potato in all its glory.
And did he have to be panting? I mean, what was that with his tongue?
I actually think I know, because they keep calling him Frog Face.
Toadface.
Toadface, yes. And in the script, that it was sort of a combination of a human and a toad, and that's why he's doing the tongue thing.
Okay.
I've never been able to see it, because to me, they've always just looked like sentient baked potatoes.
Right.
And then also on top of that, Kevin Lindsay, the actor, had a heart condition and was incredibly hot wearing the latex Sontaran mask underneath the helmet. So he was actually panting a little from the heat as well on top of that.
They made him wear the makeup even when he was wearing the helmet?
Certainly for shots like this, yes.
Wow. If they did it all the time, that's just cruel. That is totally unnecessary.
But I think the tongue thing he does is wonderfully creepy.
It is.
It also is hard for me because I have a friend named Kevin Lindsay, and it just boggles the mind every time. Like, I'm just like, it's not the same person. Definitely
Different
not.
Kevin Lindsay.
Different one.
All right, that takes us into part 2.
We got a little bit of a long recap. Not as bad as some of the others. But it was a bit long. But what I like is that Sarah Jane has a backbone.
Oh, she's got some fire.
Kicking and screaming and yelling. And oh, it was so good.
Yeah, she is great from the very start. And she is still believing the whole thing is an act and is like, guys, knock it off. And you see her mind starting to tick. And she's like, well, it's not a pageant. It's not a film set. Must be a tourist attraction. Oh, Sarah, you got so close.
So close.
A little bit further on, you'll wind up in Westworld. It's fine.
Oh, boy. But we do get more mind control. And that made me very sad. At least it's used sparingly, and it's only for the length of which he has that, whatever that thing is, and whenever it's on. So I'm like, it could be a lot worse.
It could. I think it's so funny, additionally, that he doesn't know what a woman is.
He thinks
Different
it's a whole nother
species.
When they try and kind of explain, he goes, I understand. You have a primary and secondary reproductive system. It is inefficient. You should change it. That was just brilliant.
That is exactly what was being pulled on New Who when they were, was it Strax? I believe the character, the Sontaran.
Yeah.
I mean, they basically took that kind of concept of humor of the Sontarans and carried it over, and it was brilliant with him. I guess this is the origins.
I feel like it's a lot more subtle with Lynx. There are funny moments, but it's not outright being played for laughs.
Right.
It's done, I don't know, almost like they know there's some humor there, but it's not done just to make us laugh.
Well, I think one of the things, too, is that since this is the origin of it, whenever things are referenced in the future, it's always more over the top than what it originally came from.
Also true.
Again, I'm going to go into some of the sayings of our lovely medieval folks because it's fun. But he does say, tell me how the Iron Man works.
And the answer, not very well.
Tony Stark would be appalled.
But the introduction of the robot does give Sarah the opportunity to wander off and escape.
It's so funny because Irongron is just like, she won't get far. Like, what?
He's an idiot.
He's not a very good leader. Let's just put it that way.
No, I feel like Irongron and Bloodaxe are your kind of Holmesian double act, but in this case, they're both just idiots.
What I also find interesting with that robot, I'm just sitting there watching that robot. I'm like, that is a very inefficient robot. Don't care who you are, but I'm pretty sure I could sword fight against that robot and I'd probably win.
As soon as I saw the remote control, I just went, well, that's a stupid idea. That's not going to work.
And you were right.
It's not very good at fighting, but set it up to like prep some vegetables. It could probably just do wonders with that.
Yeah, like the vegetable cutting droids in The Mandalorian. Or the Book of Boba Fett, whichever one it was.
What I also find interesting is, okay, so we send the robot out against Hal because instead of just beheading him, we're going to have this robot do it. Would one of the arrows that they made back then really be able to pierce the robot at all?
I think so.
You hear that, Mythbuster guys? Get on it.
Because when they were mentioning it first, they were like, he would be able to get into the chinks of the armor, which is typically what would be done is like, around the elbows, shoulders, neck. That's where you would actually hit somebody with a bow and arrow. And then it's just sticking straight out of the chest.
And on top of that, you would think that Lynx would design a robot where the machinery wasn't in those weak points as well.
Let's be fair. Lynx was just phoning it in. He thought they were all rubes. He was like, well, I need to buy some time. I'll just make like some shoddy work. They'll just be all amazed by it, and I can get the hell out of here.
I don't know. I think it kind of hurt his feelings that they weren't super impressed by his robot. And they're like, I'll make you another one. It'll obey voice commands. You don't have to try and impress him, dude.
And in the end, he just gives up. He's like, screw you guys.
You know what I'm actually impressed by? The fact that when Irongron finally sees Lynx's face, he just doesn't care. He's just like, oh, you're kind of ugly. Well, anyway, deal with this robot thing.
Yeah. Brilliant. So we have the Doctor and Sarah Jane basically doing different things, right? So the Doctor goes off into Lynx's dungeon, for want of a better term, and finds Rubeish. And meanwhile, you have Sarah Jane and Hal making it back to Sir Edward's castle. And she still believes the Doctor is helping Irongron, even though she has just encountered Lynx.
I mean, they all could be in cahoots, you know?
Yeah. She hasn't seen any evidence that the Doctor is a good person.
He's just the asshole that asked her to make coffee.
Yeah. I actually really like the fact that for once we get a companion that really doesn't trust him at this point. And she's still doing her own thing.
It's been a while since we've had that.
Yeah, Don raises a very good point, and it kind of ties into his summary. It does feel at times, especially with that plot development, that this is the Sarah Jane show, not the Doctor show.
Well, yeah. I mean, at no point is she kidnapped and waiting to be rescued.
She just does it herself.
Yeah, she goes out, she meets up with Hal, they go back, meet up with Lady Eleanor, they make plans.
And arguably, she saves the Doctor.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say arguably. She does save the Doctor.
If we think about modern Doctor Who, we're kind of used to the show periodically providing new jumping on points. And it's been a while since we've had that in classic Who. Arguably, you could say maybe Terror of the Autons, perhaps even as far back as Spearhead from Space. Do you think that this is consciously an attempt to give a new jumping on point by giving Sarah Jane as more of an identifiable character who doesn't necessarily know the Doctor as well as other characters do?
I don't think it's conscious.
Yeah.
But I think it works.
Okay.
Because if it was more conscious, I think you would get more of an introduction to, say, Unit and the Brigadier.
Yeah.
And a bit more talking about who the Doctor is.
Yeah, there's an interesting thing about the show is that at times the primary driver of arguably sometimes even to a whole season is not the Doctor, it's another character. And sometimes the Doctor's the person who's driving the show. But it really does feel like with this, it's more of, welcome to Doctor Who. You need to connect or focus and see yourself through the eyes of Sarah Jane, not through the Doctor. The Doctor is something separate from you. While I feel like in previous times, especially with Spearhead, it was all about the Doctor. Granted, because that was a new Doctor was being introduced, but it just seemed like there was so much more focus on him. While this seems to be telling the audience, you need to look at things through her eyes instead of his.
That's fair. The other thing is when the Doctor has his info dump session with Lynx and ultimately tries to bargain with him, he just casually drops the name of his own planet for the first time with absolutely no ceremony. And that's Gallifrey. Woo!
Yay, more lore.
And we also get a fair amount of world building there, because we hear about this war that's been going on between the Sontarans and the Routans for centuries. It's just like Robert Holmes is just doing that all in a huge info dump. I like it, though.
I like that they didn't go too far into Gallifrey. We just had Lynx acknowledging, he's like, yeah, I've heard of them. I don't care. And I'm like, cool, great. They're not like the end-all be-all of the universe like they have been in New Who.
Getting towards the end, after the confrontation with Lynx, Lynx puts him in this chair thing that zaps his brain a couple of times.
Do we get a gurn there?
We do get a gun. We do.
Ding, 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 ding.
So that's +1 to the gun count, starting out the season strong.
And Rubeish saves the day.
Yay.
But the doctor says, excuse me, Professor, I've got to find a young girl. Oh, Pertwee. And, oh my God, Ingrid and Bloodaxe just standing there when the doctor encounters them.
Yes.
What an idiot.
Is this the handshake moment?
This is the handshake moment.
Yeah, that was funny.
And then we wrap up the episode with this glorious runaround shot from above in the courtyard where Terry Walsh is clearly having the time of his life.
Brought to you by the Benny Hill Show.
Yeah. And he hits Ingron, and he's ready to swing his axe on the doctor, and that's our cliffhanger, and brings us into part 3.
Where we get to see it all over again, all 2.5 minutes of it,
Yes.
or so.
Until, of course, he is rescued by Sarah Jane and Hal.
He thinks he's saved, and then she's like, no, you're not.
It's not a rescue, it's a capture.
Aha.
So I love that aspect of it.
We also get one of my favorite lines in this when Ingron is describing the doctor to Lynx. He describes him as a long-shanked rascal with a mighty nose. The medieval dialogue is just something else.
It's wonderful. We also have Rubeish, who continues to be awesome, and he makes himself a lens so he can actually see shit.
Yes.
I love it. He's resourceful, and he saves the doctor several times. He's doing a lot of companion-y type things.
And he never panics. He never seems overwhelmed by the situation.
Oh no, he's very nonplussed by everything.
Don, I think you're onto something here with absolute Rubeish.
See? Guaranteed hit.
It's also at this point that we're introduced to the fact that there are serving wenches.
Yes, because of course there are.
And they come back in a later episode as well, and that's surprising.
Back at Edward's castle, I love the option that Edward gives the doctor. I'll spare your life if you work for me instead of Ingron, otherwise I'm going to kill you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a pretty easy choice.
Some good negotiation skills right there.
Yeah, I would choose to help Edward in that scenario.
We called him a wet blanket, and yet these were the choice that he gave one of his prisoners, so...
That is very true. Well, I guess at this point he's in fight or flight mode. He knows Ingron has some stuff going on that's beyond his power, so he's either got to get the doctor to work for him, or he's going down. But I really love the doctor's strategy here with his smoke bombs and his, effectively, mannequins. I think it's brilliant.
Yeah.
It felt like an episode of the A-Team, a little bit. That or Army of Darkness.
Surprisingly, it reminded me of a sequence in the movie The Swiss Family Robinson when the pirates are scaling the hill and they're throwing bombs and everything else. That's what it reminded me of.
I think that's absolutely what it is, Julie. You took the words out of my mouth there.
I like the fact that you could tell it was there because they couldn't afford a real assault.
Yeah.
So they're like, let's just fake it. It'll be fine. And it worked.
The siege itself, when Ingron's men put up the scaling ladders, candidly, it's probably one of the more ambitious things the show has done recently, and there is no CSO in sight.
Nope, but you do get a little bit of Python there at the end.
Yes, you do.
Run away.
We also get chicken-hearted knaves again.
Oh, yes.
And I love the fact that he's the one who led the retreat. He then calls his men out of being chicken shit, and then Lynx calls him out and being like, well, I thought you were the one who led the retreat. Oh, it was so wonderful. I love all that.
I feel like we should not let it pass that at this point, Sarah Jane has had a costume change.
Oh, yes. The mini costume changes of Sarah Jane.
She has her own kind of like Robin Hoodish kind of green thing going on in this scene. Later on, she changes into something else, but I love how they do that as a sign to the audience that, see, like with Edward and that crew, she's already allied with them so much that she's already got clothes from them. She's already like working in with them.
I find it interesting that she was able to convince them to not give her a dress at that point.
Yeah.
Well, a dress wouldn't have been particularly convenient for where they were.
But they wouldn't have cared about convenience. They would have been like, you're a woman, you need to wear a dress.
I don't know, some liberties were taken here, I think. What I do like about it, though, is it kind of just repeatedly shows that Edward and co have money and Irongron don't. So Sarah Jane is getting costume changes. You look at Edward's castle and it's ornate. They've got decorations. Everyone is dressed nicely. And then Irongron's castle is extremely threadbare. You look at the serving wenches and they're all in extremely dirty clothes. They do a good job at contrasting the two, which I really, really like.
So we go back and he's like, okay, we did the stink bombs. Now we're going to try another thing. We're going to try the sleeping drought. So the doctor just doing whatever he can not to kill anybody. And when they go back and his thing is about charity of Irongron.
As monks?
Oh, yeah.
But the disguise is fine. I love the disguise. They should have kept the disguises on for longer than they did. But the charity thing of Irongron made zero sense.
Well, I think it was part of like a joke. I think he knew that his men would be so, I guess, sadistic and knew that Irongron would probably do something horrible to them. They just kind of viewed it as a prank, like, oh, yes, come on in. Yeah, you see what he's going to do to these monks for asking for money.
And the doctor absolutely knows that.
That was my read.
Yeah, I think he's 100% knowing that that's not the case and it's just a way to get in and he knows that they'll have a good laugh about it.
Does that constitute as her second wardrobe change? Is the friar outfit?
Yeah, sure. Let's go for it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I guess technically it's the third because she has that blue and white garb underneath it. So she's obviously put that on first and then put the friar outfits on top of it.
Oh my gosh. Semantics, Anthony.
Sorry. It's been that kind of week. The other thing that's going on here is you can tell as the story's progressing, the relationship between Lynx and Irongron is just getting more and more frosty. They don't like each other, but they kind of need each other. And you know this is not going to end well between them.
I was never really entirely sure exactly how much Lynx needed Irongron. Once he had his stuff in there, he could have killed them all quite easily.
So why didn't he?
I don't know. I don't think he also considered him to be enough of a threat to bother at that point.
And there were definitely times where he basically made comments of, you amuse me.
Yeah, I think it was an amusement thing. He's like, they can't kill me. I'm just going to sit here and laugh at them. And then, haha, when I leave, they're going to all die.
Especially when you have Irongron constantly threatening Lynx and saying how he's going to kill him. And like every time you've moved towards him with a weapon, it's been destroyed. Easily. What do you think you're going to do?
And also, I think since Lynx loves war so much, there's an element of, I might get to see some battles if I keep them alive because he's fighting this other guy, Edward. It really is just something to do while he waits for his ship to be repaired and recharge.
The one thing that they didn't show me and I was really sad about was earlier in the episode, they had made reference to having to ride over to Edward's castle, and they were like, hey, let's give Lynx a horse. And I really wanted to see a Sontaran on a horse. Really did.
Yeah, it's going to be a while before we see that.
I know.
But when we do, it's glorious. We're once again left here with, well, firstly, Lynx has absolutely no understanding of how humans work. He gives his brainwashed scientists no rest, little food, and still expects them to somehow be able to function and berates them for not. So when the doctor tries to bargain with Lynx again, Lynx just zaps him with his wand. No class whatsoever. And that leads us into our cliffhanger and part 4, where we have Sarah Jane's first hero moment, stopping Lynx from further hurting the doctor.
Rubeish comes in.
Rubeish!
Getting his own hero moment.
Again, I love Sarah Jane. She never got captured and she does a lot of things. But I still say that Rubeish does more things that are more companion level things than Sarah Jane does.
Yeah, I mean, the doctor is talking to Lynx and saying, that's the problem with you Sontarans. You have this weak spot on the back of your neck. Rubeish is like, I see what you're throwing down. Smack. Smart dude.
Going back to what Julie said, we haven't had that moment yet. Right now, from our perspective, we're watching this and we know she's the companion. And I'm not saying that back then they were hinting like, who could it be? But in the narrative, in the story, she hasn't agreed to travel with the Doctor. This is just a one-off thing right now for her. So we haven't had that scene that happens so often in New Who, that kind of pact that's made between a companion and the Doctor, where the Doctor asks them, will you travel with me? Right now, like I said, she's just getting her story as a journalist, going on this crazy adventure, hope to survive it, get back home. That's it so far. That's all we know her motivation is. Sometimes it happens later. I remember a scene with Jo where she didn't want to leave the TARDIS, and he had to basically kind of coax her out, or not coax her, that sounds like he was lying. He wasn't, but he infers a duty of care.
Yes. Back in Colony in Space.
And that is what I'm talking about. Something like an agreement between the two. And we don't have that, but there's usually some sort of mechanism that make her want to stay around. And we just haven't had it yet.
The other thing I really, really like at the beginning of this episode is some of the dialogue. We have Bloodaxe being an absolute idiot still.
Yes.
Iron sends him to fetch Lynx, and the Doctor puts on Lynx's helmet, crouches down and says, I'm busy. And Bloodaxe says, well, come soon or we'll come and fetch you. You've just been sent to fetch him, dude. What are you doing?
And then someone says egalitarian twaddle. That just made me happy. Like, doesn't matter in what context it was said. Just, that's a wonderful little phrase right there.
Apparently it's Time Lord egalitarian twaddle.
Yeah.
They've never seemed terribly egalitarian to me, but what do I know?
And then you also have Rubeish saying, who is Irongron anyway? Nice chap? And the Doctor goes, well, I wouldn't recommend him for the Royal Society. The dialogue here, even if it is over the top with Bloodaxe and Irongron at times, I think is absolutely sparkling. It comes across well, even if it's ridiculous.
Then we get the Doctor, because Pertwee needs to have his fight scene.
And another disguise.
And another disguise. It's not as fun as the maid, but I just sit there and I'm like, first off, can't you see the visor? There's a face there as opposed to last time. It just, although Irongron is really dumb.
Really dumb.
But Bloodaxe said he had a towering intellect.
To someone with an IQ of 2, someone with an IQ of 4 does have a towering intellect.
The best part about that was after he said it, Irongron gave him a look as if like, is he insulting me? Or does he believe that? Like it totally confused him.
When they decide to fight the Doctor as well, right? So Irongron takes him on, then he brings Bloodaxe into the fight, and then wants to put a couple of crossbow bolts in him as well. Guys, you're trying to destroy your robot here. That isn't really a robot, but they don't know that because they're idiots.
It doesn't work because eventually the Doctor's like, well, I don't want to get hit with a bow and arrow or crossbow.
This isn't very sporting, is it?
Yeah.
Doctor, come on. And he's really lucky that Irongron doesn't decide to just behead him and wants to try out the guns.
But before we quite get there, we have Sarah Jane doing her thing, in which I liked what she was doing, but I was real sad that she didn't quite accomplish a rebellion, because that's what it seemed like at first. She's talking with this serving wench. She gets conned into working in the kitchens, and she's down there doing that. And she's talking to the serving wench, and she's talking about like, hey, like, wouldn't it be nice if you're not like stuck down here? You don't have to follow Irongron anymore. And then the serving wench is just like, just do your work, and leaves. I'm like, dang it. I wanted to see the serving wenches like rise up against Irongron and his goons. It would be great.
You want him killed by the serving wenches, not by Lynx.
Yes.
That would be great, actually.
But clearly that was a nice to have, but there was always the plan to put the potion in the food.
Yeah, that just seems so boring, though. What's better, like potion or rebellion?
That sounds like Vicky talk.
Feminist uprising, let's go.
Yes.
I love that whole sequence. I think Sarah Jane, story 1, she is proving her worth. No matter how much we seem to prefer Rubeish at this point, she is doing stuff.
Oh, she is, yes. No, she absolutely is doing stuff. It just so happens to have a soft spot for Rubeish, so.
And when they're shooting at the Doctor, she's the one who runs in and does the chandelier swing and comes to the rescue, because she's fantastic. Yep. I just love that whole sequence.
We have that sequence because, again, we need some more Action Man heroics things that Pertwee.
It's the Errol Flynn moment.
Yes.
The buckling of the swash.
We then get where, okay, we need to save the scientists before we deal with the rest of everything that's going on. So the Doctor's teaching Rubeish how to do it, which is apparently through polka.
Yeah.
Because why not?
in that scene, I couldn't help but think, so he's flashing a light, and it seemed to be a sequence. And I thought about how Pertwee was in the Navy, right?
Yep.
And I can't read Morse code or whatever, like the light signals that ships make when communicating with each other. But I couldn't help but wonder, was he actually sending something that was not gibberish? Was there actually a message encoded there, I wonder? Listeners, look it up.
Yeah, please tell us if you know.
So he basically has taught Rubeish how to deprogram or clear the minds of the other scientists. And now they have to, for a little bit longer, pretend that they're still under this spell.
Additionally, I want to talk about Lynx when he goes off to tell Irongron that he's leaving. Because Irongron is like, oh, you're so funny. And Lynx is like, no, you need to go and get a new castle if you want to live. And he's like, by the sword, Lynx, you're hilarious. You will be my jester. And then they all fall asleep.
Breakups are hard to do.
Once again, Irongron somehow thought that he had some power over it.
Yeah, not done well, Irongron. Not done well.
Then we have the Doctor versus Lynx. That all happens with that weird spinny shield thing that works for like half a second.
Mm-hmm.
Then some Aikido action because Aikido solves everything.
I think Pertwee's had more fight scenes this serial than he has in a while.
Yeah, that's probably fair.
Probably in his new contract.
Quite probably. Because I think he was on a season-by-season contract, so yeah. And while this is going on, Hal's going around disarming everyone, and Irongron wakes up.
I feel like he does a really poor job of disarming them because he literally just lays those swords onto the floor.
Yeah.
He should gather them up and take them away.
Irongron had just been drugged, and Hal hadn't. I think he could have done a slightly better job at the hand-to-hand combat.
Also, I love how Irongron's immediate assumption is it's Lynx who has sent them all to sleep.
Yeah.
And he goes off in a rage, and Lynx finally is like, you know what? I'm just going to kill you. Could have done this ages ago, but I'm fed up of your bullshit. Dead. Irongron, not the way I would have wanted him to go.
He died as he lived, in a stupid, barbaric rage.
So it's super convenient that the sleeping drought did not last very long for anyone.
They're able to get everyone out before the castle explodes. But I want to talk about the death of Lynx, because in the original script, it was going to be the Doctor who shot the arrow into the probic vent at the back of Lynx's neck. And they changed it up so it would be Hal.
They did the right thing.
They did the right thing.
I 100% agree.
Now, I find it bizarre that Hal just either, one, miraculously knew where to aim, or two, oops, I didn't know where to aim and it just happened. Both are rather convenient.
You would have thought he would just hit him in the back of his big bulbous head, but no.
Maybe Hal isn't that good of an archer and was actually aiming for the back of his head. Maybe he would have missed at the beginning, even if Sarah Jane hadn't distracted him.
Just went wildly.
Also, what was great is because, again, since I watch all of these with subtitles, I'll blame the Cybermen for that one. I got this wonderful thing that said, buzzing intensifies before the spaceship blows up.
I think that's a meme waiting to happen.
Oh, it was wonderful.
You know, we had not discussed the exit amongst the two guards out in front of the gate where the Doctor walks. Yeah, it's a very Three Stooges bit where he does the, hey, look at my open palms kind of thing. Honestly thought he was going to do like the fluttering hand and then poke him in the eye or something. That's about the same level.
I think it's such a sign of Irongron being such an idiot that the only people who are following him are also idiots. Because, seriously, Stranger is leaving the castle and is like, hey guys, come look at this. Hi!
Right.
They just don't swing at him. Idiots.
I know we don't need like a full-fledged ending, but I did not like how this episode ended so abruptly.
Yeah.
It's very quick. Not a lot happens after the castle blows up. It's like a very quick goodbye said to Hal, with the Doctor saying, I'm not a magician at all, wink. TARDIS takes off and we're done.
The thing I worry about is we've just introduced a new companion, but she's not actually said that she's going to stick around with the Doctor. Usually there's some sort of ending that says if she's thinking about it or anything along those lines. But at this point, it's just like, and we're done.
Yeah.
It just feels off.
Maybe we'll get that at the beginning of the next serial.
Maybe. We don't get that a lot in old Who.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like that would be what they would do. I don't know. we'll see.
With that, we're at the end of the serial. Let's go ahead and rate this one. And this time, we are starting with Reilly.
This is short and sweet. You get your new companion in Sarah Jane. The Doctor is still chill. You get the introduction of the Sontarans. Rubeish is a charming supporting character. We went back in time for what feels like the first time and a long time. The concept is good. I didn't get it enough to emphasize how I thought the direction was poor. I know I mentioned the blocking and the scene at the lockup of the scientist in episode 1, but also the courtyard run around Benny Hill thing with just the lazy wide, like almost looked like a crane shot, just was not my cup of tea. But that's my only strong criticism. This doesn't have a lot of oomph, what you would expect from a season opener or the introduction of a new companion, but it is decent. It's a nice short, like I said, short and sweet. So I will give it 7 rejected American Gladiator names out of 10.
All right, I'm next, and I have something to disclose on this. This is one of the first Doctor Who stories I ever saw.
Okay.
So this one has a little bit of a special place in my heart. It was The Mind Robber, this, and The Ark in Space, which we'll get to next season. And even rewatching this as an adult, probably first saw this one around 30 years ago, I still find it enormously enjoyable. Robert Holmes does such wonderful things with characters and brings in just fantastic supporting characters. You look at Professor Rubeish, and we've all praised him. You look at the ridiculousness of Iron Gron and Blood Axe, and there's no subtlety there at all. But then you contrast that with Edward and Eleanor, and there's a lot of subtlety in that power dynamic. I love what he did with the Sontarans and building up a little bit of lore there that will come back later on in the show. And overall, I just find this one really, really fun. So it's probably an element of nostalgia that is going to influence my score, but I don't care. And as a result, I'm going to give this one 9 foil-wrapped baked potatoes out of 10. Don, over to you.
I really enjoyed this story. It wasn't setting out to do anything hugely incredible and ambitious and failing and falling on its face. There are a few directorial issues, but the characters are there and they're good. And it's just a lot of fun. I like that it's sort of leaned towards getting to know a new companion, and it makes me look forward to seeing more of her stories and what she does. So, to quote Iron Gron, I'm giving this 8 narrow-hipped vixens out of 10.
And before we move on to Julie, I do just want to say, I do think it does a good job at introducing Sarah Jane Smith. We learn a bit about her background. She comes in, she asks questions, she does stuff. Excellent introduction, in my opinion. Anyway, Julie, over to you.
I think a lot of you guys have hit on a lot of points. The direction had a few issues here and there, but we have a really, really strong story. You've got some really entertaining actors, people that we will remember. Like, how can you not remember Iron Gron after this? And there's just short and sweet to the point and nothing crazy and nothing to write home about. So I am going to give it 7.5 chicken-hearted knaves out of 10.
And that gives us an average for the story of 7.88, which I think is reasonable for a season opener. That's a good, strong season opener. But with that, that brings us to the end of our episode. And we will be back next time when we head to contemporary Earth with Malcolm Hulk's annual lizard extravaganza in Invasion of the Dinosaurs. But in the meantime, as always, thank you so very much for listening. We appreciate you taking the time to listen to our thoughts on a very enjoyable story. And until next time, have a good one. You have been listening to Watchers in the Fourth Dimension with Don Smith, Reilly Schreck, Julie Philippek, and myself, Anthony Williams. This episode, Absolute Rubeish, was recorded on Tuesday the 10th of May 2022. If this is your first time listening into the show, all of our previous episodes are available wherever you like to get your podcasts. You can interact with us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at @Watchers4D, and you can also email us at watchers4d@gmail.com. If you're enjoying the show, please do subscribe and consider leaving us a review or rating on your favourite podcasting app. All of those things really do help the show. And always remember, Donald Pelmere is still alive at the time of recording. Big Finish could still make absolute Rubeish.